I first laid eyes on 237, Dogwood Lane on a brisk autumn day. The sky was bright and clear, leaves swirling as the wind carried them down the quiet suburban streets. Something about the house felt welcoming. A wide front porch for morning coffee, a spacious backyard full of potential, and a sturdy two-car garage that gleamed with possibility. After years of renting cramped apartments, I finally had my own place, complete with a homeowner association that, according to my real estate agent, mostly just handled trash schedules and landscaping guidelines. In hindsight, I should have asked more questions about that HOA. I'd heard rumors about controlling boards, petty rule enforcement, and power-hungry neighbors, but I dismissed them as worst-case scenarios. This neighborhood, known as Oakwood Heights, seemed so inviting. The lawns were neatly trimmed, driveways lined with potted plants, and neighbors waved as I drove by. It felt perfect. On my moving day, the air was crisp with the promise of an early winter. My friend Jonah and I hauled boxes from the U-Haul into the house, setting them in piles that matched each room's label. Midway through the unload, I glanced around and realized a woman was watching us from the sidewalk, hands on her hips, lips pursed like she was assessing a problem. She appeared to be in her mid to late 50s, with immaculate hair shaped into a short, practical style that stayed put in the mild breeze. Her outfit, a neatly pressed blouse and tailored slacks, gave off a certain severity. She met my eyes, then took a slow step forward, carefully avoiding the stray leaves underfoot. "Hello," I greeted, wiping sweat from my brow. "Good afternoon," she replied. "Are you the new owner?" "Yes, just moving in. My name's Nick Norris." She nodded sharply. "I'm Marilyn Gardner, but folks around here sometimes call me Karen, some sort of silly nickname that stuck. I'm on the HOA board for Oakwood Heights. We take pride in keeping our community running smoothly." The way she said, "running smoothly," carried a subtle edge, like an unspoken challenge. I offered a polite nod. "Nice to meet you. I'll be sure to follow whatever guidelines are in place." Her gaze traveled over my moving boxes, the half-open garage, and the U-Haul blocking part of the driveway. "We do have regulations about parking. Typically, we don't allow large vehicles to block the street, but I suppose we can make an exception for your move-in day." I forced a smile. "I appreciate the leniency." Inside, I wondered if this was a preview of the kind of scrutiny I'd be under. She gave a curt farewell and walked off with an air of self-importance. Jonah raised an eyebrow at me. "Dude, that was intense. You sure you're cool with living under this HOA?" I shrugged. "It's just one person. I'm sure the rest are friendlier." But as the days passed and I began settling into my new life, I noticed that Marilyn, or Karen, seemed to have her nose in everyone's business. She routinely strolled the neighborhood with a clipboard, making notes about lawn heights, garbage bins, or any perceived infractions. I learned that while some neighbors simply called her Marilyn, others privately used her Karen nickname because of her pushy nature. They warned me in hushed tones that if she took a disliking to you, the HOA citations could pile up fast. Despite that, I still held on to the hope that I'd stay under her radar. How wrong I was. About 2 weeks into my new residency, a formal letter from the HOA arrived in my mailbox. "Welcome to Oakwood Heights," it read in bold script. The letter included a bullet-point list of guidelines and regulations. Most were pretty standard. Keep your lawn trimmed. Store trash bins out of sight except on collection day. No commercial vehicles overnight. That sort of thing. Tucked near the bottom was an item about garage usage. Garages are intended for vehicle storage or related home uses. Residents are encouraged to park personal vehicles in their garage to maintain clear streets. No subleasing of garage space is permitted under any circumstances. At the time, it didn't strike me as anything remarkable. I planned to keep my car in the garage anyway. But the letter felt oddly fixated on proper use, emphasizing that the garage was an integral part of Oakwood Heights' aesthetic. I found it strange to treat a garage as an aesthetic feature. Nonetheless, I shrugged and tucked the letter away, focusing on painting my living room and gradually unpacking the chaos of boxes. During my 3rd week, I was heading out to pick up groceries when I spotted Marilyn across the street. She waved me down, approaching with purpose in her stride. "Hello, Nick," she said. "I hope you've been settling in nicely." "Sure have," I replied, keeping my tone friendly. She tilted her head. "It's been noted that you don't always park your car inside the garage. You often leave it in the driveway, sometimes even on the curb." I tried to recall if I had parked on the curb. Maybe once, when I had too many groceries and needed the driveway clear to unload. "I do use the garage sometimes," I said. "I guess I haven't been consistent. Didn't realize it was required." Marilyn's lips tightened. We strongly encourage keeping vehicles in garages for a cleaner look. If you have storage boxes taking up space, it might be time to tidy them. Oakwood Heights values order. My chest tightened. She was policing my driveway? I'll keep it in mind, I managed, trying not to bristle. She nodded curtly. We appreciate your cooperation. Then, without waiting for a response, she walked away, her posture rigid. After that encounter, I felt a simmering annoyance. It wasn't that I didn't want to keep my car in the garage. I did, eventually. But the garage still had half my moving boxes, tools, and a bike or two I needed to store properly. Maybe in a few weeks, I'd clear space to park inside. The pushy tone about cleanliness and order grated on me. Little did I realize that Marilyn's fixation on the garage would soon escalate beyond anything I could have predicted. As autumn gave way to early winter, the days grew chillier. I spent weekends making my house feel like home, organizing the garage, building shelves, and moving heavier boxes around. Sometimes I left the garage door open for ventilation while I worked. I started to notice something odd. Once or twice, I found footprints on the concrete floor that I didn't recognize, as if someone had stepped inside when I wasn't there. The first time, I chalked it up to my friend Jonah maybe stopping by unannounced. But when I mentioned it to him, he denied having visited without letting me know. Another time, I found a gum wrapper in the corner, which seemed strange since I didn't chew gum. Could it have been a neighborhood kid snooping around? Then, on a Saturday morning, I heard a soft scraping noise from the garage while I was in the kitchen. I padded over to the door leading to the garage and listened. The scraping stopped. Opening the door, I saw nothing but my half-unpacked boxes and my car. Could it have been the wind rattling something? Feeling mildly unsettled, I locked the door behind me and resolved to keep a closer eye on the area. One evening, returning from a dinner with friends, I noticed my garage door was slightly ajar, maybe 6 inches from the ground. That was impossible. I always shut it fully with the remote. Fear prickled my spine. Did someone try to break in? Heart pounding, I used a flashlight to check inside. Nothing seemed stolen or out of place. I ran through all the scenarios in my head. Maybe I'd accidentally pressed the remote button in my pocket? Or perhaps there was a glitch with the garage opener system. I decided to invest in a small security camera. Nothing fancy, just a motion-activated camera that could record if anyone ventured into the garage or driveway. If there was a petty thief or curious neighbor, I'd at least have evidence. The very next HOA meeting was held at the community clubhouse. It was my first official meeting, so I thought it wise to attend and stay informed. I arrived to find a group of about 20 residents sitting on folding chairs, facing a table where the HOA board members, including Marilyn, were situated. They discussed budget allocations, upcoming seasonal events, and property maintenance rules. Midway through, a board member asked if anyone had new business. Marilyn cleared her throat and launched into a mini-speech about proper garage usage. Some folks in our neighborhood use their garages as storage dumps, forcing them to park vehicles on the street. We want to ensure everyone is adhering to guidelines to keep the community neat and organized. I propose we start issuing courtesy notices to any homeowner who consistently fails to use their garage as intended. A ripple went through the crowd. Some people exchanged weary glances. One man next to me whispered, "She's at it again with her garage obsession." Another woman rolled her eyes and scribbled something on a notepad. I sat there, feeling singled out. Though Marilyn hadn't named me, I suspected I was near the top of her offender list. When the board president asked if there was any official bylaw specifying mandatory garage parking, Marilyn hesitated. The president then politely stated, "Our current rules strongly encourage garage parking but don't explicitly require it. We need to vote on an amendment if you want to start issuing citations." Marilyn pressed her lips together. "I see. Perhaps we should consider such an amendment, for the community's sake." After the meeting adjourned, she caught me near the refreshment table. "Nick, I hope you understand I wasn't singling you out in there. We just have certain standards to uphold." Her tone was so disingenuous I forced a neutral smile. "Of course. I'll keep an eye on it." She nodded, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes, as if she'd won some small victory by rattling me. It fueled my resolve to stand my ground. What was next? An amendment dictating which brand of car I could own. The woman's thirst for control seemed limitless. Over the weeks, my motion-activated camera captured mostly mundane footage. Me carrying boxes in, Jonah visiting, the occasional cat wandering by. Then, early one Saturday, I went for a jog and came home to a surprising scene. My garage door was open, and there was a silver sedan parked inside, one that certainly wasn't mine. I froze in the driveway, confusion swirling. Did a relative or friend randomly park in my garage? That made no sense. I inched closer, noticing the license plate, my heart pounding. The sedan had an Oakwood Heights decal in the rear window. This had to be a neighbor. Anger flared. Who had the nerve to park in my garage without asking? Before I could react, the side door of the house, leading into the garage, opened, and out stepped Marilyn Karen Gardner herself. She wore a casual jacket, hair in its usual perfect bob. My jaw dropped. "You," I barked, shock mixing with outrage. "What are you doing?" She had the gall to look mildly annoyed at me, as if I was the trespasser. "Nick, I saw your garage was empty, and my driveway was blocked by some landscaping work at my house. I needed a quick spot. I assumed you wouldn't mind." My voice rose. "You assumed you could just park in my private garage? That's trespassing. How did you even open the door?" She waved a small remote. It looked suspiciously like the same brand as my opener. Maybe a universal remote or a reprogrammed device. Let's not be dramatic. I'm on the HOA board, and we often have ways to access resident garages for emergencies or compliance checks. I just borrowed it for a short time. I felt a jolt of disbelief. That is absolutely not allowed. This is private property, Marilyn. She gave me a patronizing look. Don't be so territorial. I noticed your car wasn't here, so the garage was going unused. My car needed a spot where it wouldn't block traffic. I'll just be a few minutes. My hands shook with anger. Get out of my garage now. To my amazement, she held her ground. I will once my quick errand is done. If you want to be so unwelcoming to a board member who helps keep the neighborhood safe, that's your choice. But you might want to think about being a good neighbor. A surge of red flashed in my vision. I'm giving you 1 minute to move your car. She pursed her lips. Fine. Turning on her heel, she got into her sedan, pressed the ignition, and reversed out of the garage, almost clipping my lawn. Rolling down the window, she fixed me with a glare. You didn't have to be rude. As she sped off, I stood there, heart hammering, struggling to process what had just happened. Marilyn had, without permission, gained remote access to my garage and parked her car inside as if it were her personal space. This was beyond any petty HOA squabble. It was a gross violation. I stormed inside, determined to do something about my garage security. She must have had a universal remote or some master code. I needed to change everything. That night, I purchased a state-of-the-art smart garage system with unique codes, real-time alerts, and remote lockdown functionality from an app on my phone. Once it was installed, no one, especially not Marilyn, would be able to open that door without my explicit permission. Installing the new garage security system took a couple of days. I mounted a high-tech opener that synced with my phone, plus a motion sensor that would ping me if the garage door opened unexpectedly. The system allowed me to view a live camera feed from anywhere, lock the door, or even disable it remotely. A friend who worked in home security helped me set it up, ensuring we changed every code from the standard factory defaults. During the process, I discovered something unsettling. An older universal remote had indeed been left inside the opener's side panel, maybe from the house's previous owner. If Marilyn somehow got her hands on it, she could have reprogrammed it to the old frequency. That only reinforced how critical it was to overhaul everything. By the time I finished, the old opener was gone, and a new, tamper-resistant system was in place. I breathed a sigh of relief. If she tried her stunt again, she'd find the door locked tight. Still, the brazen nature of her invasion weighed on me. I debated whether to file a police report. If I told them she'd parked in my garage, would they do anything? Probably not without any damage or a witness. My security camera had been angled more toward the driveway, so the footage showed her car rolling in, but her face was partially obscured, and the entire thing had lasted only a few minutes. I decided, for now, to keep the footage and wait. If she tried it again, I'd be fully prepared. In the weeks following that incident, I saw Marilyn around the neighborhood, but she avoided me. I caught her glaring from afar, as if she was resentful that I'd barred her from using my unused garage space. I overheard tidbits from neighbors. Apparently, her own driveway was partially blocked by a large tree planting project she'd commissioned. She must have been desperate to stash her sedan somewhere else, and she'd decided my garage was fair game. A neighbor named Alice confided in me. Marilyn's had run-ins with others before. usually about minor violations, but sometimes she does overreach. She's always rummaging for some new reason to find people. She thrives on control. Hearing that I wasn't her only target gave me some comfort. Still, I half expected a random HOA complaint letter in my mailbox. Strangely, none arrived. Maybe she was biding her time, looking for a bigger issue to pin on me. Meanwhile, my new security system performed flawlessly. I tested it a few times, trying to open the garage with my phone from down the street, activating the lock mode, reviewing the camera feed. Each time, everything worked. I felt confident that if Marilyn tried something shady, I'd catch her red-handed. Then came a cold December evening. I was out grabbing dinner with Jonah. We took my car, leaving the garage empty. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed with a notification, garage door opened. My stomach dropped. I quickly switched to the live camera feed. Indeed, the door was up, and a car's headlights were shining inside. Rage flared. She was back. Without hesitation, I tapped the lockdown icon on my app. The system beeped, and the garage door began to roll down behind the intruder's vehicle, sealing it inside. Another tap engaged the door's deadbolt feature, ensuring it couldn't open from the inside or out, not without my override. Jonah, noticing my expression, asked, "Everything okay?" I explained in a tense whisper, "That crazy HOA woman broke into my garage again. I just locked her in." He stared. "That's wow. You want to call the cops?" I nodded. "Absolutely." I dialed 911, explaining that someone had trespassed into my private garage and was currently locked inside by my security system. The operator said they'd send an officer. My heart pounded. This was it. I had the footage, a locked door, a caught trespasser. Enough was enough. We paid our bill hastily, jumped in Jonah's car, and sped home. Along the way, I periodically checked the live feed. The car was still inside. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of a figure trying to pry at the garage door edges. The feed had no audio, but I imagined cursing or frantic phone calls. A swirl of vindication mixed with adrenaline filled my stomach. As we neared my house, I spotted the flashing lights of a police cruiser in the driveway, just outside the closed garage. An officer stood there, talking into his radio. Another officer was near the side entrance, presumably checking if there was another way in. Pulling up behind the cruiser, I jumped out. "I'm the homeowner," I announced, greeting the officer. "She's inside my garage. I locked it remotely when I saw her trespassing." The officer, a tall man with a calm demeanor, nodded. "We got the call. Mind explaining the situation?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "I have a new security system. She's an HOA board member named Marilyn Gardner. She's used a universal remote or something to open my garage door and park inside without my permission. This is at least the second time. Tonight, I got an alert on my phone, so I locked the door behind her." The officer pursed his lips. "Trespassing is a serious matter. Let's see if we can talk to her." He motioned for me to open the door. I fiddled with my phone, deactivating the deadbolt. The door rumbled up. Light flooded in, revealing Marilyn's silver sedan trapped inside. She stood by the driver's seat, looking furious and disheveled. Her face contorted in relief and anger when she saw us. She stormed out. "Thank goodness. That maniac locked me in here." The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. Are you Marilyn Gardner?" She jutted her chin up. "Yes, I am. I'm on the HOA board, and I have every right to check on residents' garages if there's a suspected violation or need for emergency access." I nearly laughed. The officer turned to me. "Is that correct?" I shook my head. "No. She's not the homeowner. She had no permission, and this wasn't an emergency. She's parked in my private space, without invitation. I have security footage of her entering." The second officer spoke. "Ma'am, do you live here?" Marilyn's nostrils flared. "No, but I..." He cut in. "Then you have no right to forcibly open someone's garage. That's trespassing. May I see your ID, registration, proof of insurance?" Marilyn fished her wallet from her purse, handing over the documents with trembling hands. She glanced at me, eyes blazing. "Nick, you went too far. Locking me in like a criminal? You could have just asked me to leave." My voice trembled with anger. "This is the second time I've found your car in my garage. The first time, you brushed me off. Now you do it again while I'm out. If you hadn't forced your way in, you wouldn't have been locked inside." She sputtered. "My driveway is blocked by landscaping equipment. Where else am I supposed to park?" The officer narrowed his eyes. "Park on the street." or in a public lot. You can't just break into someone's property. We'll be filing a report." At the word report, Marilyn seemed to panic. "Is that really necessary, officer? I'm sure we can handle this within the neighborhood guidelines." "Neighborhood guidelines don't override state law," he replied firmly. "Breaking and entering a private garage is a criminal matter." Marilyn turned pale. She stuttered, but I didn't cause any damage. I'll leave now." She tried to climb into her car, as if planning to drive off. The officer told her to wait, explaining that she could be issued a trespassing warning or citation. I stood aside as they ran her license and plates. I could hear Marilyn pleading with them not to arrest her, to keep this out of the public record. At one point, she shot me a venomous glare, as if this was all my fault. The irony nearly made me laugh. She was the intruder, not me. The nerve. After confirming there was no outstanding warrant or major issue with Marilyn's license, the officers conferred. One came over to me, pulling me aside. "We can press charges for trespassing if you like, or we can issue a written warning. It's up to you, sir." I glanced over at Marilyn, who was waiting by her car, eyes filled with a mix of fury and apprehension. She'd obviously never expected to be caught, let alone locked inside and forced to deal with the police. On one hand, I wanted to see justice done. On the other hand, pressing criminal charges would escalate the entire fiasco into a drawn-out legal battle. I didn't particularly want that level of drama in my life. I also worried about possible retaliation from her on the HOA front. "Let's do a trespassing warning," I said at last, my voice steady. "I want it on record that she can't enter my property without permission again. But I won't push for arrest if she agrees to stay away from my garage." The officer nodded. "We'll make it clear. She's not to do this again." They walked back to Marilyn, telling her she'd receive a formal warning for trespassing. She looked both relieved and resentful. "This is absurd," she muttered. "I was only using space that was sitting empty." "Private space, ma'am," one officer corrected. "You do it again, you'll be charged." Marilyn shot me a glare. "Fine. I'll never set foot in your garage again." She climbed into her sedan, turned the engine over, and backed out. The officers waited until she was gone before turning back to me. "Sorry you had to deal with that," one said. "At least it's documented now. If it happens again, call us immediately." I thanked them, still shaking with residual adrenaline. After they left, Jonah exhaled. "Holy cow, that was intense." I gave a short laugh. At least it's over. She's been formally warned. Still, a small part of me worried about the fallout. Marilyn had shown no remorse. If anything, she seemed outraged that she couldn't do as she pleased. People like her rarely just slink away quietly. Word spread quickly about the garage incident, although the exact details were fuzzy from rumors. Some neighbors heard that Marilyn got locked in my garage. Others thought I physically detained her, and still others believed she'd threatened me with legal action. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, there was quite a buzz in the community. I decided to attend, anticipating potential drama. Sure enough, Marilyn sat at the board's table, arms crossed, looking stony. The president, Mr. Cho, opened the meeting by addressing various routine topics. Eventually, someone from the audience brought up garage usage, obviously referencing the fiasco. Marilyn cleared her throat, adopting a righteous tone. "We recently had an unfortunate misunderstanding involving private garage space. I want to clarify that the HOA occasionally needs access for emergencies. Residents should be aware that if they choose not to utilize their garage for personal vehicles, the board might investigate." She paused, shooting me a pointed glance. "However, I stress that we do not condone locking neighbors in or calling the police for misunderstandings." My blood boiled, twisting the story to paint herself as the victim. I raised my hand. "With respect, I'd like to correct that account. The board does not have free rein to enter private garages unless there's a proven emergency, which there wasn't. No guidelines state you can forcibly park your car in someone else's garage. Also, I locked the door remotely because Ms. Gardner had entered without permission. There's police documentation of trespassing. This was no misunderstanding." A few people in the audience murmured. One man piped up, "That's an abuse of power, Marilyn. You can't just decide your neighbor's garage is yours to use." Marilyn's face reddened. "I never said it was mine to use at will. But the homeowner overreacted, and the police escalated a situation that could have been handled privately." I snorted. How was I supposed to handle it privately when you broke in while I was gone? The HOA president gestured for calm. Let's not turn this meeting into a shouting match. Ms. Gardner, do we actually have any bylaw authorizing board members to use private garages? Marilyn stiffened. Not specifically, but we do have broad powers to ensure compliance with HOA guidelines and to address potential hazards. Parking your personal vehicle isn't a hazard, the president interjected. Frankly, it sounds like you overstepped. Murmurs turned into audible agreement among many neighbors. Marilyn's expression hardened. I realized her standing in the community might be shifting. The rest of the board seemed reluctant to defend her. Eventually, the meeting moved on, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Marilyn's attempt to spin the narrative had largely failed. After that HOA meeting, I received quiet words of support from several neighbors. They recounted minor incidents where Marilyn had overreached, though never as blatantly as parking in someone's garage. It seemed I'd inadvertently become the poster child for standing up to her bullying. Still, I remained cautious. People as forceful as Marilyn often retaliate in less direct ways. A week passed with no sign of her meddling. Then, on a random Tuesday, I found a compliance notice on my door stating my side fence was in need of painting. The fence was in decent shape, albeit a bit weathered. It felt suspiciously like a petty attempt at retribution. Rolling my eyes, I resolved to repaint it in the spring, just to avoid further drama. But I made a mental note that if the notices kept piling up, I'd call them out for harassment. Meanwhile, I decided to step up my home security. I added a second camera that covered the side yard and fence gate, plus motion lights that clicked on after dusk. If Marilyn or anyone else tried sneaking onto my property again, I'd have clear evidence from multiple angles. My phone app was loaded with alerts. If there was a hint of movement, I got a ping. Friends teased that I was turning my home into a fortress. In truth, I still found Oakwood Heights quite lovely, aside from Marilyn's antics. I enjoyed quiet evenings on the porch, the tree-lined streets, and the friendly nods from other neighbors walking their dogs. But I refused to let my guard down when it came to my garage. That space was mine alone. Late one night, perhaps around midnight, I was jolted awake by my phone buzzing. An alert from the garage camera. Motion detected. Adrenaline surged. Could it be her again? Heart hammering, I tapped the feed. Sure enough, the garage door was creeping up, but only a few inches before the system locked it back down. An error message scrolled across the screen. Unauthorized access detected. Door secured. Someone was definitely trying to open it from outside. My side camera showed a figure in a hooded coat scurrying away. The image was grainy, but the silhouette looked suspiciously like Marilyn. I caught a glimpse of her face in partial profile, enough that I was fairly certain. She fled across my driveway, vanishing into the darkness. I stared at the screen, stunned. Even after the police warning, even after public embarrassment at the HOA meeting, she was still messing with my garage. Or maybe this was her attempt to see if my new security had any vulnerabilities. Furious, I downloaded the footage to keep as evidence. At that point, I realized enough was enough. The next morning, I visited the local police station, bringing along the new clip. I explained the background, her prior trespass, the official warning, and now an attempt to open my garage door in the dead of night. The officer on duty recognized my name from the prior incident. He frowned deeply as I played the footage. "This is definitely suspicious," he said. "We gave her a warning. If you want to press charges, we have cause." She clearly tried to open the door again. I took a deep breath. Part of me still hesitated, not wanting to blow this into a criminal case. But how else would she learn? Let's file an official complaint. I'll get a restraining order if I have to. She's repeatedly trespassed. The officer nodded, taking notes. He said they'd follow up, likely pay Marilyn a visit. I left feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. This was the nuclear option, but it seemed warranted. The following day, I received a call from a detective who said they'd spoken to Marilyn. She apparently denied everything, claimed she was asleep that night, had no idea who tried to open my garage. The footage was dark and her face partially obscured, so it wasn't conclusive proof. The detective mentioned that, lacking a crystal-clear ID, they couldn't definitively charge her with attempted trespass. However, they reminded her that any further incidents could result in immediate arrest. I found the outcome unsatisfying, but not surprising. At least the police had confronted her. Now she knew that if she tried anything again, it would be her word against video footage, and each time, my system improved the clarity. She was on thin ice. Predictably, I soon got another petty violation notice from the HOA, this time about algae on the driveway. I snapped pictures, showed them to neighbors. None saw any algae, just a faint discoloration near the curb. It was comedic in a sad way. Everyone suspected Marilyn was behind it. I responded with a letter contesting the citation, copying the entire HOA board. The board eventually rescinded it, further isolating Marilyn. Neighbors whispered that she was losing her grip. She had once been the unstoppable, meddling figure scaring everyone into compliance, but now many were banding together, pushing back. Ironically, my fiasco with the garage had emboldened them. I guess that was small consolation for my continued aggravation. Weeks turned into months. The new year arrived. The landscaping in Marilyn's driveway finished, freeing her parking space. I heard rumors that she was strongly encouraged by other board members to step down from certain committees. She remained on the board officially, but her influence waned. Some neighbors demanded that the bylaws be updated to explicitly forbid the HOA from entering private garages except in extreme emergencies, like a fire or gas leak. The measure eventually passed, further limiting her self-proclaimed authority. As for me, I carried on with my life, far more relaxed now. My garage stayed locked under the watchful eye of my security system. I never had to lock anyone inside again, but it felt good knowing I could if it came down to it. I repainted my side fence, removing any excuse for petty citations. Once in a while, I'd glance at the old footage of that night Marilyn got trapped, remembering the stunned look on her face when the door rumbled shut. A few times, I saw her around the neighborhood. She'd avert her eyes, pretending not to notice me. Maybe shame or anger still lingered. If we ever crossed paths, she maintained a stiff politeness. No more audacious demands about my garage. I heard from Alice that Marilyn had started parking on the street when her family visited, as if she didn't dare risk another fiasco. One sunny spring afternoon, I was washing my car in the driveway when Marilyn passed by. We made the briefest eye contact. She gave a tiny nod, perhaps the smallest acknowledgement that our feud had ended in her defeat. I nodded back, continuing to rinse soap suds off my hood. Reflecting on it all, I realized how bizarre the situation had been. A grown woman, so obsessed with control that she felt entitled to park in a stranger's garage. But it had also been an eye-opener about the extremes people can go to, especially when cloaked by the authority of an HOA position. The irony was that her meddling inadvertently helped me discover a supportive community, neighbors who were tired of her tyranny, grateful that someone finally stood up to her. In time, I fully reclaimed my sense of home. I built a workbench in the garage, set up a small workshop for weekend DIY projects, and parked my car inside every night without worry. The new normal felt wonderful. And yes, I upgraded to an even better camera system, just in case. Life in Oakwood Heights continued. We had block parties, yard sales, and casual get-togethers. People mowed their lawns, put up holiday lights, and occasionally swapped stories of Marilyn's prior escapades. Over time, the tension dissolved into a faint memory. She never tried entering my garage again. Her humiliating encounter with the police, and that lock-in, had taught her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. I suppose, in the end, that was the best victory, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. Peace returned, with a subtle reminder that no matter how pushy a Karen might be, private property is not up for debate. And if she ignored that boundary, well, at least I knew exactly which button to press to keep her and her car under lock and key until the cops arrived.